Welcome to your morning cup with iBenz Academy. I'm Kara.
And I'm Ash.
We're Kash. Hello.
We're so excited because this week there's been tons of activity and conversation and podcasts about Sasquatch.
Yes.
And we live in the Pacific Northwest, which if you're familiar with the Pacific Northwest of the United States, it's kind of a hot spot for Sasquatch or Bigfoot or Yeti activity.
Yeah, especially Washington. You see Sasquatch paraphernalia, like images and stuff to buy, merchandise everywhere. And literally everywhere.
Yeah. And there's believers and there's non-believers and there's the people, everybody in between, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's really fun because you get a lot of different perspectives. But in particular, this week at IneliaBenz.com, Inelia wrote a newsletter about Sasquatch and how Sasquatch have strong boundaries. To accompany that, her and Larry released a podcast, Driving to the Res episode, with Todd Standing and nature-infused Ash.
Mm-hmm. And if you're not familiar with Todd Standing's work, he's pretty much like one of the world-leading experts on Sasquatch.
Yep.
He has a documentary on Netflix. He posts tons and tons of YouTubes all the time, lots of research, photographic evidence, all of these things. And he takes people who are interested in connecting with Sasquatch on expeditions. So Todd is in the Pacific Northwest this week, and he has a couple of expeditioners with him. So naturally,
we got to join along.
Yeah, we wanted to hang out. We're like, Sasquatch, ooh.
Yeah, it's so awesome because not only does Todd like to go on expeditions to be able to research, because of course he's a Sasquatch researcher, but he also really, and he says this, he loves creating the experience for others to be able to connect with Sasquatch. And that's really the key here, right? This is all about connection.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And expansion of awareness, because there are so many amazing co-creators in our rendition of Earth. And Sasquatch is one of those species, one of those collectives that have a long history with us as humans. And if you'd like to learn more about that, read the article from Inelia Benz. We'll post the link in the show notes. But she goes into great depth about how this connection can be rebridged. And that's one of the ways that Todd, focuses and brings people onto that experience, which is super cool.
So we thought for today it would be fun to share some of our firsthand Sasquatch experiences.
Yes.
Do you want to share your stories first?
Sure. Yeah. So just for some quick background, growing up in the U.S., I'd heard of Sasquatch. I grew up in Colorado, which is more in the west, like Midwest part of the country. And, you hear about it in pop culture, like movies and TV, and there's like believers and non-believers and all these things. And frankly, I didn't really have an opinion. I was just like, whatever, cool. Maybe there's truth to it. Maybe it's a story long gone by. Kind of like, I don't know, Nessie in Scotland, the Loch Ness Monster, right? It's like, maybe there's something to that, but I never really looked. So when I first came to the Pacific Northwest, this was to the first retreat at the Shaman Shack in 2017.
Which is where we met also.
Yes. Actually where we met. Our origin story, kind of. Anyway, and it was so fascinating because I think it was the first or second night, maybe it was even the first night, when all of the folks who had joined that retreat came to the Shaman Shack. We were, bunked and, going to bed for the night. And in the middle of the night, all of a sudden, I hear the craziest, loudest noise I've ever heard in my life. Now, I grew up in Colorado, so I know what wildlife in North America sounds like, whether it's coyotes, foxes, cougars, bears, you name it. And they do make actually really weird sounds, especially coyotes. They sound like people, actually, we won't go into it. But anyway, they make some upsetting noises and stuff. But when I was falling asleep, or it was in the middle of the night, I woke up and I hear this noise that's like the mix of, it's so hard to explain, but almost like a Native American chant war dance song
with a hyena,
with like a hyena or a coyote laughing, plus like a third element, which it's like there's no way to humanly reproduce it.
There's not. People have asked, what did it sound like? It's like,
I could
I don't even know how to begin.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, and the thing that was so surprising was it was so loud. Like, we are inside the shaman shack, like 4 people in one room in a bunk, and other folks are sleeping around the property. 2 people were actually in a tent outside. They definitely heard it and were like, oh, terrified. They actually came inside because they were like, oh, we don't know what that is, and freaked out. But what was interesting, despite like how loud this noise was, and it progressed for a couple minutes, and there was people who were sound asleep.
Yeah.
Like, knocked out cold.
It was like half the group, maybe 10 people there total, something like that. And half the group heard it and half didn't. I was asleep. I was actually, I think I was on the bottom bunk.
You were?
The top bunk, yeah. And I had earplugs in. And like, I had earplugs in because somebody in the room was snoring and I couldn't hear their snores. I was in the same room with someone who was snoring quite loud.
Very loudly, I heard the snores.
I couldn't hear that, but I could hear this.
Yes.
Like, that was like, it almost even felt like it wasn't with my ears. Like, it felt like it was in my head.
Exactly.
Like, I was like, what the heck is this? And then I took my earplugs out, and then I still heard it. And I was like, whoa.
It was so loud.
Yeah.
And it was just the strangest, most unique sound I've ever heard in my life. But it wasn't, like, scary. It felt, like, exciting, and
It was almost even like just a welcoming, like,
Yeah.
you're here, or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
and we were truthing it too. And to me, I've always gotten it was Sasquatch.
Yeah, same.
And they were just it was like kind of first contact. Like, yay, you're here. We're excited you're here.
They were so excited. And the next day it was fun. We exchanged stories. We're like, did you hear that last night? Wait,
Yeah.
hear what? And, you know. So, to me, like, in my inner knowing, it felt like, and I know it was Sasquatch. Mm-hmm. And I never thought about it before. I wasn't a believer, non-believer. It was like, whatever. But after that day, I'm like, yep, Sasquatch are real. And that was just the beginning. So, but yeah, you were there for that too. And
pretty cool.
quite a welcome to the Shaman Shack.
Mm-hmm. It was like, I grew up predominantly in Arizona, which is in the southern states in the U.S., and I don't remember a lot about Sasquatch at all. I lived in Colorado, and then I started to move to Colorado, and when living there, I saw more about Sasquatch. Like, they're, like you were saying, they're like on posters or signs locally and stuff, but I just never thought about Sasquatch. Like, I just remember like a video that was really poor quality, and looking out over the water in the distance, there was maybe a Sasquatch, and like on YouTube or something, and everybody debunking it, saying no way. So I just didn't think about it. It was kind of like, whatever. Or like, hey, what, Harry and the Hendersons, I think.
Oh,
was
yeah.
a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Like, you know, like when I was a kid, but just never thought about it. And then coming out here and then having that experience, it was like eye-opening right away. Like, that was not like normal.
A little unexpected.
Totally unexpected, but really cool. And then it was like, oh my gosh, let's find more Sasquatch stuff. Let's connect. So living out here, there's been tons and tons of examples or times where we've made connection of some sort, whether seeing them, whether connecting through experiential telepathy, or maybe hearing them. They'll do knocking sometimes, or certain hoots and calls. Yeah. So there's been a lot of different ways. And honestly, more than anything, sometimes it's just having an awareness and a feeling like, you know, you're not alone and they're there, but you don't see them. There's no signs. So it's one of those, you're always like kind of skeptical, like, are they really? You know? But
and then
and
then you might see one.
Yeah, exactly.
Or part of one, or smell one.
Yeah. But the great thing is, at least from what I've learned, and I've heard this from other people really consistently, and for example, actually Todd shares this too, they do a lot to like introduce themselves to people who are open to seeing them, and they will do it gradually. And that's been my experience too. Very gradual. I mean, hearing a Sasquatch noise while I'm sleeping in bed was way easier to take than like having a Sasquatch like standing right in front of me. Because I probably like, oh my God, you know? So it's like, since then it's been progressively gradual, like introduction. And they don't want to scare people, which is really nice. Unless like maybe they don't want somebody around.
Right.
Might scare them. But
Yeah.
in general, that's not the experience I've had with them.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. It's been like a gradual progression over the years. And we've lived here for what, 3 or 4 years now? And their presence is very strong here. Like you can see it in the collective. Sometimes you might notice how there are certain energies in the collectives that will show up like through artists or even just the subconscious expression of people. And we see Sasquatch stuff everywhere. And a lot of people out here like have had connection and experiences. There's also almost every year at least 1 or 2 expos or Sasquatch festivals, where folks come together and share research and notes and stuff and experiences. We've attended some of those too. And a lot of them are local and some travel all around the world to come too. And it's like, wow, yeah, there's something here because a lot of people have had similar experiences that we have had and vice versa, which is pretty cool.
And it's a cool way to connect even with others with other people because like the Macaw Nation about 3 years ago, I think it was, had a Sasquatch festival and they had elders sharing stories. Macaw elders were sharing their stories of encounters. And then they also had guest speakers from local and beyond. And it's just so cool to hear it and connect in such a different way and start to learn like, yeah, we're not all just making this up.
Right.
It's like coming up in so many different ways, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But we recently went on an expedition with Todd, and he had his expeditioners, and of course we tagged along. Mm-hmm. Larry had scouted out the location ahead of time. He was really focused on like where do we want to go, where should we lead the expeditioners and take Todd, and so that was really cool because it was super seamless and really fun, just a great energy, get everybody together. We're all like ready to do some hiking in the woods, and we were moving slow.
Yes.
Like super slow.
Well, we did have, an elder, a baby, pregnant woman, about 15
But it was
15
like, we're
people.
just looking at everything and talking and learning, and Todd's just such a natural teacher and teaching us all. Like,
hey, look at this. And,
yes.
This is what this means, and take a look at that. And he was teaching us along the way about what to look out for and how to truth things, to connect and all these things. It was really cool.
We were definitely on a trail of like there's Sasquatch activity here.
Yeah.
And before we went out, I had this feeling that I needed to bring my malas. I have these here, right? So malas are prayer beads. It's a necklace that typically has 108 beads, and this is actually a power object. And so what happens is folks who use these will pray, and then they use the beads to count their prayers. So say if they're saying a chant, then they can count their chant by using the beads and track it. So it always reminds me kind of an abacus, but for meditation. So anyway, so I had this feeling I needed to bring these beads with me, which is interesting because like they're not quiet. You're going out into the woods and like...
How often do you like bring your prayer beads on a hike?
Yeah,
like,
right.
I don't know, maybe others do, but it's not typical.
I had a niggle, and I followed my niggle, and my niggle was that these would be helpful to connect with Sasquatch. Okay, great. I didn't know why, but that was my niggle, so I followed it. So we were out there, and everyone was, walking around. We're all walking around, and I just got this feeling I needed to go off of the trail into the woods and start looking out beyond, like, the main path that we were on it. And I call it a trail. It wasn't really a trail. We were making it a trail.
Yeah. It's probably like an old logging road that was overgrown the last 20 years.
Yeah, something like that.
Maybe 10.
Yeah.
So there was enough of a path we could kind of have a trail through the woods, but it wasn't like clean and pristine and easy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We definitely had to like
machete some things.
Yeah. So I'm off into the side of that trail and in the woods, and I get the feeling I need to pull out my beads. So I have my beads on my neck, and I put them in my hands, and I was just connecting with the beads, and I'm walking around, and I walk back onto the trail, and then I start getting visions, like experiential telepathy. And actually, it's more like footage, if you will, because it's like, it's not just flat. It's not like a picture. But I see I have past life recall of some lives in the Himalayas, in Tibet, and in the Buddhist practice. And so I see myself with prayer beads and chanting. And so I'm like, oh, okay. Like, so I'm making connection. That's what it was to me. Like, I get this image and this footage, and to me in my mind, it's like validation. Okay, connection is made. I'm connecting with a Sasquatch. Awesome. So I'm seeing it, and there's like kind of like images flying by, like, and it's from a perspective almost like the Sasquatch's view of me in those lives, right? That's what it looked like. And, you know, which is interesting dynamic in itself, and I can't totally explain that. But if you think, like, the human collective is connected, right?
Right.
Sasquatch are connected, and so even through generation, through, you know, distance, there's collective memory. So I don't know how to explain that, but that's interesting, something we could explore maybe in the future. But then I'm following it, I'm holding on to my beads, and I'm still following my intuition. And I had decided I really wanted to find a footprint. Like, I had that feeling before I went off into the woods. I want to find a footprint, because to me, a footprint was like super clear. Because there's definitely other ways that you could see breaks of branches and different weavings of branches and things. But I wanted something so clear that it was like, you can't deny a footprint. You know, that's just like, that's the ultimate, like, Sasquatch sign in my mind. So anyway, I'm walking around, and then on the other side of the trail, there's some ferns and trees, and I just look over these ferns, and I step over them, and I look down on the ground, and there's a footprint. And I'm like, oh, I think there might be a footprint. Wow, I think this could be a footprint. So I call out kind of quietly. I'm like, I don't know if it is, but it looks like it could. You were like, a big toe. Like, Kara, this might be a footprint. And I was like, Todd, really quiet. And Kara's like, Todd! Ashley found a footprint! Yeah. And I was like, it's not a footprint, but you should look. Or no, I said, I don't think it's a footprint, but you should look. Right? Which is funny, right? Just the whole invalidating of it. But I was like,
Yeah, so he comes over. I knew instantly it was a footprint. I'm like, she found a footprint.
Yeah, so he comes over, he looks, and he's like, holy smokes, yes! And it had the negative pressure. So they have like a hinge in their foot. I don't know the terminology. You'll have to do that research on your own. But it had the negative pressure where basically like there's a little mound in the footprint as well, based off of their structural design of their foot. So here's this footprint, and it's so cool because you're out there with Todd that he like helps validate that as a researcher with like
years of experience,
over a decade of experience looking at footprints and all these things. Yeah. Like, awesome. Like, I can't just make it up in my head that this happened. But it was so cool because how did I find this? It was like experiential telepathy and power objects, right? And being able to make connection. That wasn't about me being out on a trail and just looking, because there's so much out there. There's so many twigs and bushes and trees and, you know, footprints from dogs and footprints from people and just everything. Yeah. Right? So I think Larry was saying it's like finding a needle in the haystack. You know, it's like you can, but it's very challenging to just go and find it.
Right. From like a logical perspective, the amount of time or likelihood it would take to find like a tiny, you know, I mean, it wasn't tiny, but like a footprint in this massive forest. We hiked like 2 miles, maybe more, with all these trees. And then like the odds of finding that by happenstance are like very low. Right. Extremely low.
Like, why would I just go off into the bushes and like over these like ferns? Like, it just doesn't. No. It wouldn't have been what I did in general. But I was on a very particular purpose, and it was connection that there was agreement on all sides, right? It was a co-creation, orchestration to be able to have that experience. Yeah. So that I could find that footprint. And, you know, it really was one of those dynamics where it's like, kind of like the mystic life hack, you know? And that's what I love about mysticism. Not the only thing, but it's like we learn how to be able to go beyond just like our 5 senses that are just like the standard that we all know about, you know? And we get to be able to expand our awareness and use connection to be able to have an easier go at things, you know, to make things more dynamic or to make things just more accessible in our awareness.
Yeah. And honestly, the more connected we become, the more powerful we become. And how many ways did you connect in that story? Like, first, being connected in the sense you followed your niggles, right? You could have easily just said like, oh, that's just a crazy idea. Who brings malas to a forest hike? But you didn't. You're like, oh, I should do this. Okay, I'm going to go do this.
And when we got to the trail, I expanded my awareness and intentionally was expanding my awareness to tap into the Sasquatch collective.
Connection, right?
Connection.
Yep.
And then even on the trail, right? It was like connection through these malas, being receptive to the Sasquatch. And then also with the others around me, like Kara, being connected with her, helping to get Todd's attention. Because I could have... There's part of me that was just like, I bet this isn't, like, I'm just not even going to say anything, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Just the ego.
We want to validate.
Yeah. So Kara makes sure, like, really loud, Todd! You know? And then connection with Todd, coming, you know, a researcher who has experience and knowledge, and, you know, and there you go. And it wasn't like I've done this before. I mean, I've looked for Sasquatch signs, but it was with my eyes.
Yeah. We actually did find a footprint before. That's a different story, but... This, like, orchestration was amazing and just so incredible. And the connection piece, right?
Yep.
Even experiential telepathy is about connection. You're connecting with that other being that you are communicating with, right? And it's a two-way street. And connecting with the power objects. Power objects are all about connection. And using all of these tools together to have this experience, which then... expanded the awareness of the whole group. Like, it was incredible to have literally one of the world's most renowned Sasquatch researchers look at this footprint, analyze it, share it with his students, with us, and give us insights about why, you know, how and the shape and how we could tell the sex of the Sasquatch and
the age
and like
everything.
All these things. Wow.
And then it also deepened the connection. Like, he's like, okay, you found it, so now take your shoe off and put your bare foot in the print. And I was like, oh, you know, and I didn't want to mess it up. And I'm like, oh, okay, you know, kind of like dabbing my foot on it. And finally I was like, all right, fine. I'd like, you know, put my foot in it. And he even said something to the effect of like, you're going to connect with this Sasquatch now. And it's going to be like genetically, like in your body, you've now got this connection with them. And it was true. Like, he said it and I was like, okay, cool. But then I could feel her and I felt this like excitement, like, yay, we connected. And then I could feel the collective of the Sasquatch in a stronger way than before, that, yay, we've connected, like the Sasquatch in the area. So it did create also further connection to a larger degree, right? And more depth in that connection.
Oh, yeah. And what an amazing experience for us as a group to, like, just look at this, to share in this experience with you and to, you know, see a footprint and have the analysis and learn about that connection at a level I never thought about before, right? It's just so cool.
And, you know, and that's the thing with Kash. We've been training mystically with Inelia for several years now. And then also taking these classes, like the experiential telepathy. Like, I think that's a must-have if you're interested in Sasquatch and learning more. You know, locally I've heard people say like, oh, they don't use words.
Right.
They communicate in other ways.
Right. Mind speak. That's
Mind
what
speak.
Todd says. We're like, oh, mind speak. Yes.
Or just that, they communicate, but they don't use words.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what do they don't have a word to describe what it is.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, it's experiential telepathy is the way we would describe it. So, you know, there is that class, but there's also so much more at iBenz Academy that we're going to be bringing forward for you all so that you can also have these types of experiences, many different flavors of what that could be. But gosh, I gotta say, like, putting the tools to practice and actually like having like a result out of it, if you will, is so
satisfying,
rewarding,
yeah.
all the things. It's so amazing.
It is.
And, you know, you're right, we did actually do adventure excursion looking for Sasquatch, like practicing using our mystical skills and awareness. And we found prints.
We did.
So we were very successful
then too. Really cool, yeah.
But it's just, there's something about being able to put it into practice. And that's another element at iBenz Academy where with all of our workshops, we put it into practice.
Right.
We don't just teach theory. There's always going to be that practicum element to it.
Yeah, because it's one thing to like read books or listen to material, right? Or take notes, but what good is it if you don't use it? Right?
It's true.
I mean, and believe me, like, that is a habit I've had a lot of, time to overcome, because I love theory, I love lectures, I love philosophy, but at the end of the day, if you want to really step into the new paradigm, you have to embody it. You have to, like, do it, right? It's an active thing. It's not a passive thing. So that's why with our workshops, there's always going to be that active element to it. Always. Like with power objects, you have to, like, create power objects.
Got, like, malas
yes.
and bracelets and all the power objects.
Exactly. And they each can have different tools and uses and abilities. Like, this one is to enhance my mystical power. So when I'm doing mystical works, it's almost like a battery that supercharges that. So we can make that easier for ourselves. So if we are, like, doing experiential telepathy or expanding our awareness, or want to connect, let's say, and communicate with Sasquatch, I found that it's so helpful to have a tool to aid that, to help set ourselves up for success. Or like the malas, right, is another example, using it as a tool to enhance connection. And those are just some examples.
And expand your awareness and whatever else the intents are behind it. So all of that's to say too, like, if this sounds interesting to you, if this is something you've dabbled in, get yourself trained, because mystics don't go it alone. We definitely have a responsibility as mystics to make sure that what we're creating and what we're doing in our practices and as mystics is all in a high frequency way, right? And we're not doing power over others. We're not doing black magic. And it's so easy to fall into that.
So easy.
If you aren't aware and educated.
Right.
So get yourself educated. There's no excuse. So if you're doing any type of mystical work, get educated. The Power Objects Workshop class is definitely a great baseline mystical training. I mean, of course, it's not everything, but it really will give you some foundational skills and awareness that can be applied to other aspects of mysticism and other practices. And that is going to be offered for the rest of the year, every month. So there's no reason not to sign up.
Yeah.
We've got variety of times, and even there are payment options available with that too.
Yeah, it's such an important foundational skill, because it is an entry-level workshop or course into mysticism. And it explores the fundamentals that are the foundation to just a lot of this work that we're doing when we're embodying the new paradigm. And also, it's just fun and cool. And the collective request is that we all learn this. We all take this ability and we put it into effect. We're active about it. So that's why we're hosting Power Objects Workshop every month for the rest of the year. And it's really important that we learn these skills, because it fosters our connection. It makes us more powerful. And we are the ones bringing in the light paradigm. We're the ones building it. And this is part of the building, which is really cool.
Yeah. And you can have power objects for so many different things. This power object that I have is actually a power object of a we awareness, right? Like, so stepping out I, me, and myself, and stepping into a we perspective, right? And every time I see it, every time I wear it, every time I put it on, I instantly am reminded I'm a we. We're a collective.
Yep.
And it's so beautiful in that way. I remember going to, like, job interviews and wearing this, because to me it felt like a situation that was kind of like a little nervous and maybe like, some anxieties, because it's a job interview and I really want this job and, whatever's, right? So aside from just the processing, there's also that element where I brought this bracelet, this power object, and I instantly felt like I have my, like, we, it's us. And I wasn't alone, and it was confidence, and it was connected, and it was like, yeah, together we got this, And so it was a totally different energy that, from a shrunken awareness, was something I wasn't seeing. But once I had the opportunity with my bracelet and that power object to step into and see that expanded awareness perspective, it was easy. So there's so many different ways that they can be used. And yeah, that's something to definitely go to our website, ibenzacademy.com, and you can check out the courses coming up. We also have the Instant Manifestation Workshop coming up in May.
Yay! Oh, this is such an amazing workshop.
That's like if you're like a go-getter and you are a doer and a mover and a shaker in your life, like, do this, because this will only amplify your power to do and to make things happen. It's amazing.
Yeah, you might already be successful in life, right? This takes it to the next level.
It does.
And it's just incredible. The skills and tools that you'll learn in this is not only extremely practical, but you learn how to hack into the code of the matrix so that you can instantly manifest what you want in your life. Like, in order to do that, you have to understand the rules of engagement and how the matrix works. And if exploring that nature of reality is of interest, this takes it to the next level. It's incredible. So, Instant Manifestation Workshop coming up in May. Don't miss out.
Power Objects Workshop every month. Yep. And we've got more other fun, exciting workshops that will be coming up throughout the year.
Yeah, so stay tuned for those. Yeah, you're going to love the new ones that are coming out.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.